Gonna use big government to stop big government from regulating big government or something. Can the GOP please pick a lane about this and everything?
Good morning, Trumptopia. A special segment of the almost daily Zencast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zappa. Let's talk Trump.
I gotta edit that or make a new version because it's less Trump and more the post-Trumptopian version of the grand old party that we're going to talk about today, and its inability to pick a lane and keep itself from being blatantly hypocritical. Fundamentally, the biggest beef I have, because people ask me all the time, and let me put this plainly to you, friends, right here, right now, so that you can no longer wonder where I stand or why I'm doing this. My beef with the GOP and the spectrum of ideology on the right end of the American duopoly of political, ideological wedge issues of endless argumentation is not that I think the Republicans are wrong and the Democrats are right. Hello, I'm the one talking about double echo chambers. I'm the one who's saying, hey, it's been obvious to me since about 1984 that the one bird has two wings. Just because I poke and prod and critique the GOP does not mean I am blindly defending the DNC, folks. And that sort of nonsense gotta stop. Because that's called projection. And if you're going to just keep projecting on me, we ain't never going to have an actual public discourse discussion about anything. You're just going to yell at me that I'm wrong because Tucker Carlson told you to. And I'm going to try to share at you my perspective, and you're never going to hear it. And that goes for everybody on the left. But hold up a minute. I am indeed in a collaborative coalition with the left as part of the nationwide effort to hold the GOP and its various subdemographics of alt-right sociopathy in check. And here's why. Because that camp pretends they do it in Christ's name. That camp pretends that God has given them a green light. And that, dear friends, is a sort of psychopathy that has never been the good guys. Throughout all of history, the people advocating for, excusing, permissing, bending over backwards to rationalize, and in any other way, shape, or form, perpetuating targeted violence in the name of Jesus or God in general, they have never been the good guys, folks. And the GOP, no matter how much they hem and haw and clutch at their pearls, is instigating violence with its wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We're just like Tucker Carlson asking questions. Hoity-toity routine. Okay. There's a lot to unpack in what's going on in the world right now, okay? And for sure, another fundamental issue, friends, that people try to attack me on that they just don't seem to realize I speak on this regularly. They just haven't picked up, they haven't actually heard anything I said yet. And that's corruption's everywhere. I ain't pretending that it isn't. There's corruption on the left, there's corruption on the right, there's corruption in the middle. But my focus as a participant in public discourse is currently, for the time being, an emphasizing of I am focused and emphasizing the much needed calling out of all of this pseudo-Christian white nationalist malarkey that is behind all the different disparate, disorganized aspects of the culture wars, which the right and Fox News et al. Have truly, elevated to an art of pretending they started it first, even though their hands are blood red and clearly in the cookie jar. Sorry for the mixed metaphor there, friends. So much to say, but let's kick off our session today with a little bit of DJ Zed music to cleanse the palate while you contemplate the cover image of this episode. The GOP loves to celebrate the Founding Fathers and claims to be fighting for all the righteous, virtuous truths the Founding Fathers supposedly put into the Constitution. And I have seen and heard it said that the Founding Fathers would have banned drag shows. The evil of drag shows is so corrupting to the human spirit. Meanwhile, the Founding Fathers wore high heels, tight, acid, silk stockings, little itty-bitty man pants that were snug in the bottom, fancy flowing powdered wigs, and the heaviest of the most heavy male facial makeup in, recorded history. The Founding Fathers would today be run out of D.C. for being drag queens and or arrested by DeSantis' army of jackbooted thugs of election protection police and whatever it is, the new Department of Moral Officers that are shutting down drag shows. But I digress. Let us purge the mind a bit here and listen to the freshest, newest, hottest track. Oh, I'm sorry. You did tell me that note, DJ Zed. You wanted me to promote it as the freshest, newest, coolest track from DJ Zed, the intergalactic, animatronic, living, clockwork party DJ and bar mitzvah host. He will host any coming-of-age celebration independent of religious faith as long as you don't hate him for being a robot. Here he is with the newest, the latest, the greatest Lessons in Simplicity. Please enjoy. Yourself I ruined that one. Take two. Give yourself a self-guided tour of the many dimensions of the Zeboverse, including the robot rock discotheque synthetica Muzak from DJ Zed's home timeline by visiting solo.to/Mr. Zeppo and clicking on through to all the different platforms where we host all the different content creation projects we are dabbling in. Okay, friends. I think if there's one thing I would like to, demand of the grand old party, it's that it's pick an effing lane, right? If I was face to face with the GOP incarnate as a person, I'd be like, GOP, bruh, pick a effing lane, bruh, because you're swerving all over the place. And this ain't nothing new. It has been my observed understanding of the GOP that it struggles with its own hypocrisy and has been doing so since before the Nixon days. But quite frankly, I mean, the GOP is the party that declares itself the party of extreme personal liberty, the party that guarantees everyone's freedom. They run around shouting from the rooftops that we must fight for freedom because all government regulation is evil. Why? Oh, because government is Satan itself. It's run by blood-drinking monsters from another dimension. So vote me into government, and I alone will fix it somehow by hanging out with them in a room and arguing about stuff and banning drag shows. I'm sorry, you guys, but it's absurd. It's absurdity to its most absurd. Like, you can't be the party of personal freedom and also be the party that insists on using big government tactics to impose religiously inspired regulation on anyone and everyone that does not immediately comply with your pseudo-Christian and quite obviously white nationalist-oriented nonsensical ideology of exclusion. And I'm not making shit up. They say the insidious parts out loud these days, folks. I mean, they always have, behind closed doors, in their private clubs and churches. But now, on C-SPAN, Boebert quite literally called out for no, and I am quoting here, no more diversity, equity, or inclusion. We must stand up for America and end equality now. Lauren Boebert speaking at CPAC just a few days and or weeks ago, however long ago CPAC was. But the irony is, if you call that out as an observer, defenders of the grand old party will rain down on you all kinds of slanderous, childlike name-calling. And friends, I don't know about you, and this is no moral judgment, but I myself found all of this to be painfully obvious way back when, in the early days of 1984. Literally, I don't mean the book, I mean the calendar year. Because I'd read 1984 by then. I'm old enough to remember Ronald Reagan's duplicity and hypocrisy on full display about these same kinds of issues. There's so much criticism that can be thrown at the GOP for their culture war attack on drag shows. And friends, I've never been to a drag show. Literally have never been. Not because I hate them, not because it's somehow against my moral prerogatives or whatever. I don't find it offensive. I've just never been. I have no vested interest in it. I don't operate a drag show somewhere. I think I might have friends who are involved in drag shows, but I don't keep tabs on them or anything. I don't know for a fact that any of my real life acquaintances, and if they do, I don't give a flying fuck. And if they don't, I also don't give a flying fart in high wind. Here's what I do care about. Targeting minority groups of people for abuse, for oppressive legislation, and for interpersonal violence done in the name of God. That, my friends, truly chaps my hide, and dare I say, I think might rub the dear Lord himself a little bit the wrong way. But I don't think that's a conversation most American pseudo-Christians are quite ready for. But then again, neither are they prepared to admit that the laws they are defending, which, it depends on the state, but the laws they are defending are vague enough, broad enough, and designed as like big, wide, gaping, open, slippery slope, rabbit hole catch-alls enough so that they are effectively defending the criminalization of wearing clothes that the GOP doesn't agree with. I mean, that's it. The party that fights against... the party that fought real hard to strip away safety regulations for industrial train companies transporting toxic waste because regulations are an unfair burden on the industry. And the industry can absolutely totally self-regulate itself and prevent all kinds of things with its own internal. The same party is now using the mechanisms of state and federal government to dictate to adults what they can and cannot do in a free market business setting. Now, I get it, and this is nothing new. This was a tired, old, worn-out gimmick back when I first said, hey, this is a bit gimmicky, isn't it? During the Reagan era. But at the center of all the culture wars is the admirable and obviously impossible to say no to statement that we must protect the children from LGBT imagery, apparently. We must protect the children from whatever it is that you're angry about. We got to protect the children from it. Now, obviously, when asked the loaded, manipulative, and obviously psyop-riddled question, that was a poor construction, but when confronted by people who are bending over backwards to defend these various laws targeting drag shows, the common response, what they bring to the argument is all Fox News, Trumptopian, maybe not explicitly from Fox News, maybe it's from Newsmax that they got it, maybe it's from OAN or whatever that other weird, extreme, small, the one that was giving Fox News a run for its money back during the election. But their talking points are all generally the same. We must defend children from lewd behavior. Here's my response to that. I'm sorry. But if what you're worried about is lewd behavior in public, that's all already covered by public decency law, right? Like, we've already got laws covering lewd, salacious, inappropriate behaviors in public. Why you gotta shut down drag shows? Because we must protect the children from drag. But who's bringing their kids to drag shows? Who? Are Republicans somehow managing to accidentally bring their children to drag shows? A lot. I find that notion completely absurd. In fact, I highly doubt that children are going to drag shows as much as the GOP would make it sound, right? And if parents are choosing to bring their children to drag shows, is that or is that not something that the GOP spends a lot of time fighting for in other contexts, the parents' prerogative to choose for their own children? I'm sorry, GOP, but you cannot be the party that's against big government and then behave in scary, sketchy AF big government ways about the stuff that you are squeamish about. You can't pretend to be the party of family rights and self-autonomy and declare that it is the parent's job to determine what is or is not appropriate for a child and then legislate things because you think they are age inappropriate for the child that you just said it should be up to the parents to decide. You can't claim to want a radical free market where the market decides what the market wants and then complain when the market wants drag shows. Here's a tip. Don't go to the drag show. Here's another one. Don't take your freaking kids to the drag show. I tell you another thing. Don't pretend that this is some kind of moral religious issue, because if I know Jesus, he'd be hanging out with the drag queens and the lepers and the tax collectors and the FBI agents and the drug addicts and the homeless people that you don't give homes to and the sick people that you refuse to cure and treat for free. But that's a whole nother discussion, friends. As we know, the GOP is fond of claiming to be the party of Christ and then legislating all kinds of things that I'm fairly certain Christ would be scratching his head about. Maybe rolling over in his grave about. Maybe asking them straight up to their face, how the F do you think that legislation is doing the work I asked you to do? But that's a whole nother episode. We've talked about it before. I'm sure we'll talk about it again. Pin on the corkboard, friends. It is the fundamental hypocrisy of the radical right. Now, that isn't the entire right. It does seem to be the plurality of the loudest and most vocal of the GOP elected officials that they want to pretend to be one thing and then do the other. How many times in the last 40 years has the loudest, most anti-gay rights Republican politician been found to have had some kind of closet homoerotic fantasy life? A few too many times already. Fun fact. And this is a trend common enough that we come to the conclusion that the most homophobic people on the right seem to have homoerotic issues of their own. And because of that, they refuse to see how implicitly absurd and un-Christ-like it is for them to use big government to oppress the LGBTQ community. And yeah, I'm sorry, but American Christians really don't know their own supposed Lord and Savior, because from what I understand, based on a lifetime of my own personal attempt to understand the Christ, I'm fairly certain he would be hanging out defending LGBTQ community. Maybe not on every issue. There might be some issues with about which he might disagree. But I'm fairly certain he would be fighting against the Republican Party's use of big government to legislate religious ideology into state and federal law. And I'm fairly certain he would be pointing out the following. You're not really protecting kids with with your actions and your behavior and your public vitriol and your groupthink and your endless spewing of radicalized hate towards the LGBTQ community. Here's a radical idea, friends. LGBTQIA representation in media or in stage productions will not confuse kids. What will confuse children is how the adults in their lives react and behave and respond to those representations. Every human being alive today that turned out to be gay grew up drowning in heteronormative imagery. And yet they still happen to be gay. Okay. So that's plenty of evidence to indicate that representation in media doesn't determine individual identity outcomes. The people who would have been gay were gonna be gay. The only thing that having fair, balanced, realistic representation of others like them in media did was provide them context with which to pursue the understanding of their interests or identity in LGBTQIA community. Meanwhile, the public display of bigotry, the endless barrage of normalized hate speech, that, my friends, all of that is having a massive impact on the psychological well-being of children on all sides of the issue. But the GOP ain't ready for that level of discussion. At least they don't seem to be. Children learn how to hate from the adults spewing hate in their lives. It's that simple. And the simple reality is, what the GOP wants to achieve is, when taken in its entirety, considering the 30 years track record, 40 years, 50 years, I mean, you can keep going further back if you want, but I want to kind of focus my criticism on the GOP as we understand it today, which, you need a little bit of background, but you don't need to go, too far back to realize that the real agenda, the uniting mechanisms behind each and every one of the disparate culture war agenda things that they're angry about, from climate change denial to anti-LGBT legislation to overturning Roe v. Wade, all of it is fundamentally rooted in their desire to establish a pseudo-religious fake Christian, because it sure as hell isn't a real Christian, white nationalist theocracy. And that's not me making things up. That's me assessing statements made by representatives of the GOP. Anybody on the right in denial of that is really shoving their head deep in the sand. And it's up to the rest of us, whether we are Democrats or not. I'm not a Democrat, friends. Anyone who wants to come attack me for being a Democrat, guess what, buddy? You're wrong. I ain't never voted for a Democrat in my entire life. Ever. Once. I wish I could prove it to you, but there's no way to prove the absence of my voting for Democrats. Because there's no record that But I stand by that statement. I ain't no Democrat, and I sure as hell not blindly defending the political party. I stand by my statement that I'm, if not the coiner of, I'm one of the earliest adopters of hashtag 2 wings, 1 bird. And I have been asking everyone on both sides how they cannot see the obvious complicity between the two parties at the institutional level since Ronald Reagan was in office. Again, that's a whole nother discussion. Put a pin on the corkboard if you haven't already. Here's another set of questions I want to wound down the show on. Wow, wound down? Why? I want to end the show on this. This outrage by the GOP against drag shows is obviously manipulative, manufactured outrage. It is a false outrage. If it were real, the same people would be outraged at Dustin Hoffman and Robin Williams for the movies in which they played drag characters. The same people would be outraged at the Founding Fathers because they all wore powdered wigs and man makeup and would be criminalized today by the laws being legislated by state GOP legislatures banning drag performance. They would be outraged by Hooters and other similar restaurants that hypersexualize their waitresses and also have children's menus. If their outrage were real, they would be outraged at all beauty pageants. Not just the baby ones, because there's literal toddler beauty pageants. Toddlers in sexualized outfits, dancing and preening on the stage, wearing makeup and wigs. Where's the outrage? Where is the manufactured outrage for all of the beauty pageants in the world? Because even the adult ones are seen by children. Where is the outrage for the Miss America pageant? Children should not be allowed to even accidentally catch that on TV. If their logic and outrage and moral virtue about drag were real, they would be on a warpath to shut down every Hooters restaurant. And what's that other one? There's another one that's even worse. I had the meme at my disposal and then I forgot to bring it up. Here we go. Where'd it go? Right here. The Twin Peaks restaurant in Tennessee. Those would all be getting shut down. I don't see any legislation coming out of Tennessee GOP trying to shut down these restaurants. The entire sports ball institution of cheerleading, which recruits young girls at a very early age, would be immoral if their outrage about drag were based on reality and not manufactured ideological manipulation. But they're not, are they? Quick question. Which former president used to own a teen beauty pageant and was known to constantly barge into the dressing rooms of underage beauty pageant participants. Which one was that? Who? They know the answer. But yeah, me bringing that up, that means I'm suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. Pin on the corkboard. We've had a big old episode about that already, and I'm sure I'll come back to talk about that again. Because it's adorable when a group of people that commission a golden idol statue, which is explicitly forbidden in the Bible, about their favorite as president, which they claim to believe was chosen for them by Jesus. The levels of absurdity are profound, my friends. And while it's easy pickings for stand-up comedy, it's also something we must genuinely address. Because if we don't, next thing you know, they're going to step it up a notch even harder. And to all of those out there bending over backwards to try and rationalize and defend this culture war legislation nonsense, I ask you all of these questions, and y'all come back with Fox News talking points. Hilariously adorable. But do you not see the absurdity of defending this madness? And if you don't, you'll forgive us for trying to help you to see it. Because this isn't some righteous cause that will win the day and save the soul of America. This is a slippery slope of pseudo-religious theocracy being imposed on those of us who live in America that do not already immediately comply with the this crazy notion of a pseudo Christian white nationalist setting, which is what they mean when they say, make America great again. That's what they mean when they say they've got to defend America. They want to make it, once again, because it was before, a functioning white nationalist theocracy. Even though it pretended to have a whole separation of church and state and whatnot. So there's so many levels to it to be discussed. But we will pause here, friends, and end this episode on that. There's corruption to be addressed, most certainly. But as one meme points out, the only real danger about, in bringing kids to a drag show is that a Republican with a gun might show up and shoot up the place. Are there predators in the world? Of course there are. But it is obvious psychological violence targeting to say all members of that group are predators. Just did an episode about how, assigning Satan as, those, calling people demons and Satan worshipers. That's the oldest trick in the book of PSYOP. It's older than Christianity. And yet here we are, dealing with exactly that kind of manipulative machinations. And what problems does it solve? Does it solve the issue of predators preying on people who were not prepared to defend themselves? No, not really. As someone else recently pointed out in meme-ified fashion, I can't help but remember and contemplate that show, To Catch a Predator. Of all the men caught in the act of of being predators, how many of them were drag queens? Let's see, I think if I remember correctly, 0. How many of them were good, God-fearing men with wives and children of their own at home? How many of them were registered Republicans? That's a whole nother conversation, friends. Again, I am not blindly defending the left. So if that's your only response, you really haven't been listening. I am criticizing the psychosis of the right and their insistence that somehow they're doing Christ's good work. I don't pretend to be an expert on the Bible, but I sure have read me the Gospels a few times. I've even read them in direct translation straight from the original Aramaic. And I can assure you, Christ never once said a damn thing about drag or being gay. But he did tell you to love your neighbor, no matter what. He told you to love your enemy, no matter what. He told you to house the homeless and heal the sick and feed the hungry for free, no matter what. So I ask the GOP, the self-proclaimed political party of Christ, how come you're doing all these things that seem to be in exact opposition to what Jesus taught? Explain it to me, as if I were Jesus, come back for the second time, and I'm deeply, terribly confused by what the F you're all doing. I'll wait. I'm very excited to hear your response. Until next time, friends, I have been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Here's a little bit more DJ Zed to play us out. This track is called Dank Darkness Underground Express. Outrage at strip bars, right? Why isn't the GOP banning all strip clubs everywhere? Don't they know that kids are getting into strip clubs and seeing naked ladies? Where's the outrage about that? They used to rail against porn, but curiously, the GOP never banned porn. And how many kids sneak peek porn at home using their parents' Pornhub's account? Where is the outrage, GOP? Where is it? Why is it every time you're all outraged about something, it seems pretty obviously manufactured and targeted and a pretext for legislating oppressive, tyrannical legislation against a minority group, and also an excuse for allowing interpersonal violence against that group? And if y'all so mighty and righteous and got God's permission to do this, how come you can't handle these kinds of questions? How come when confronted with these questions, your response is playground bully tactics, childish name-calling, and huffing and puffing and storming out of the virtual discussion? I've yet to get any real, sensible answers to any of these questions.
And that is the latest madness from behind the orange wall. Thank you for listening to GMT, a special segment of the Almost Daily Zencast. Stay woke, Trumptopia. Stay woke.
Sarcasm disclaimer inserted here. I really got to do a whole episode on like the anti-wokeness malarkey, but I won't jump into that now. As always, friends, thank you for listening. I have been your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Remember, friends, the system wants you to fight one another over these things. For all my critique of conspiracy theory content, let it not be misunderstood. I have never once denied the reality of powerful people in control of the global systems conspiring against the rest of us. Conspiracy theory content is just one of their tools of manipulation. And that's a conversation the conspiracy theory community has not been ready for since I started pointing it out back in 1984. The system wants you to hate each other. The system wants you to judge each other over moral ideology that doesn't make any even fucking sense. The system wants you armed to the teeth and ready to shoot one another without actually bothering to reach some kind of mutual understanding. So whenever I see people worked up, whipped into a frenzy, talking about taking violent action and or speculatively hinting that they think that's the only way to solve things, I ask them, why are you doing exactly what the system wants? Don't you understand the system profiteers on our violence? You just handed them the money like Fry in that meme. Shut up and take my money! What the system does not want is for us to transcend these engineered wedge issues of cultural warfare. The system does not want us to see each other as human beings. The system does not want us to get along. Contemplate that.